Hi everyone, it's Monica. Welcome back to my TOEFL Speaking Series. For each question on the speaking section of the test, I will first introduce the question, provide the steps to answering the question, and give sample answers followed by tips on how to master your response. Let's move on to question 2 today. For question 2, you have to read a short passage in 45 seconds. Then listen to a 1 to 2 minute conversation, after which you have to provide a 60-second response after 30 seconds of preparation time. I like to call question 2 the campus situation change plus opinion question because the material is always non-academic. The reading either proposes or announces a change, then the listening is always a conversation between a man and a woman discussing that change. The student will either agree or disagree with that change and usually provide 2 reasons to support his or her opinion. Here are the steps to answering question 2. 1. From the reading passage, read and write down what the change is about. 2. Also from the reading passage, indicate what the 2 reasons are given for having that change. 3. From the listening passage, make sure you write down whether the student agree or disagree. 4. Also from the listening passage, and this is the most important part, write down the 2 reasons that the students give to support whether he or she agrees or disagrees with that change. Now let's try a question together. Here is a sample reading. You'll be given 45 seconds to read this passage. Now you can read along with me and see how I would take notes. Opening a campus cafe. The university has decided to open a new cafe on campus. Right now, there is only one main cafeteria on campus. The cafeteria is always overcrowded with students. Sometimes the lines can take up to half an hour for students to get their meals. A campus cafe could help ease the crowd during mealtime. Also, having a cafe on campus can provide students with an alternative to the library for studying. Right now, students can only study quietly in the library where food and drinks are not allowed. With a campus cafe, students would have the choice of studying over a cup of coffee or have lively discussions with their friends. Then, you listen to a conversation between a man and a woman. As you listen, first write down whether the student agree or disagree, and then take notes on the reasoning for his or her opinion. Alright, let's listen.
Hey, have you seen the announcement about the campus cafe?
Yeah, I did.
What do you think?
I think it's a great idea. The cafeteria does get really crowded during mealtime.
That's true.
I mean, sometimes I don't even have time to finish eating my lunch before my afternoon class starts because it takes half an hour just to wait in line to get a sandwich at the cafeteria.
Yeah, that's why I hardly ever eat there.
Plus, that second point about a place for studying?
Yeah?
Right now, there really isn't a good place for classmates to meet up on campus, for studying or having group discussions.
Right.
Having a cafe on campus would definitely make it easier for students to meet up. Not to mention, it's always nice to be able to chat over some food and drinks.
Your listening notes should have looked something like this. First of all, the woman agrees, and she gives 2 reasons to support her opinion. First, she shares her own story about how waiting in line in the cafeteria took so long that she was late to class. And second, she explains how it would definitely be helpful for students if there was a new place on campus for students to hold discussions over coffee, etc. After the listening ends, the question will appear on the screen. Now remember, the reading passage will not appear again. Here is what the question would look like. The woman expresses his opinion about the change announced in the passage. Briefly summarize the change, then state her opinion about the change and explain the reasons she gives for holding that opinion. Now, using your notes, your response should include the following. First, what is the change? Second, this part is optional. What are the reasons for that change? 3. In the conversation, does the student agree or disagree? 4. What is the first reason for the student's opinion? And 5. What is the second reason for the student's opinion? Remember, the reasons will be the most important part of your response. Here is an example answer. The university announced that it will open a new cafe on campus in order to ease the crowds at the cafeteria and to provide a place for students to study with food and hold discussions. In the listening, the student agrees. First, she shares that sometimes the cafeteria is so crowded with students that it takes her half an hour just to get a sandwich there. Then when she finally gets it, she doesn't have enough time to finish her meal before her class starts in the afternoon. Having an alternative place to get a quick sandwich would definitely help her out. Furthermore, the student says that right now there isn't a good place for students to meet up for group discussions or study sessions. With a cafe, it'd be much more convenient for classmates to meet up and chat over food and drinks. Okay, so that was an example in which the student from the conversation agrees with the change that was announced in the reading. Now let's listen to a conversation in which the student disagrees. Remember to take notes on the student's reasoning.
Hey, have you seen the announcement about the campus cafe?
Yeah, I did.
What do you think?
I think it's unnecessary.
Really? How come?
Well, first of all, the reason why the cafeteria is always crowded is because there's only one cash register open.
That's right. The line is always ridiculously long.
Right. If they just hire another cashier and open another cash register, it would cut the waiting time at checkout by half.
What about having a place to study?
You know, there are actually many study rooms available in the library. It's just that the room reservation process is a hassle.
Yeah, I remember you have to reserve the room in person.
Right, and you have to do it 2 weeks in advance. If they just make the process easier, like make the reservation process available online and allow instant reservations, then students wouldn't need to study at the cafe where it'd be too noisy anyway.
True.
Okay, your listening notes should have looked something like this. Now, the student disagrees for 2 reasons. First, she indicates how the real problem is actually because there's only one cash register. Okay, so if they open another cash register, hire another cashier, then they will solve the problem. Second, she indicates that there are actually other options available for studying in the library. It's just that the process for reserving a room there is a hassle. So she suggests just making that process a little easier. Then it would be unnecessary to open a cafe on campus. Now, follow the same steps to answer the question. Here is an example answer. Notice how the beginning part doesn't change because the summary of the reading is the same. The university announced that it will open a new cafe on campus in order to ease the crowds at the cafeteria and to provide a place for students to study with food and hold discussions. In the listening, the student disagrees. First, she points out that the reason why the lines are always so long at the cafeteria is actually because there's only one cash register. If they hire another cashier and open another checkout lane, it would immediately solve the problem. Also, she shares that there are many study rooms available in the library, but right now students must reserve the rooms in person at least 2 weeks in advance, which is a hassle. If they make the room reservations available online and allow students to make instant reservations, the library would still be the ideal place to hold discussions and study sessions because it's quieter. Okay, now here are some tips for mastering your response to question 2. First, always remember to summarize the reading. Now, some of the questions might not directly ask you to do that, although most of them do. Most of them will say the woman or the man expresses his or her opinion about whatever the change is, and then ask you to briefly summarize the plan or the change or the proposal. But even if the question doesn't directly ask you, you should still summarize what the plan is about. Now I'm going to read you a sentence that's taken directly out of the official guide in the ETS book. Your response should be complete enough that someone listening to your response who has not read the announcement or heard the conversation will understand what the new policy is, what the woman's opinion about it is, and the reasons she has for her opinion. Notice how the book stresses, ETS stresses that you do have to indicate enough information so that your listener know what the new policy is. Okay, so just always start with a quick summary of what the change from the reading is about. 2. Don't spend more than 15 to 20 seconds summarizing the plan and the reasons for that plan. You need at least 40 seconds to explain the reasons that were given to support the student's opinion from the listening. 3. Be specific. Now, regardless if the student agrees or disagrees with the change, make sure you explain his or her reason thoroughly. Follow through the logic. So for example, if the student shares a story, make sure you retell that story in your own words. 4. Follow my steps for note-taking, followed by my steps for responding to this question type. Then this question should really come as no surprise. If you ask me, I think this is the easiest question on the TOEFL speaking section of the test because 1, it's predictable, 2, it doesn't require your opinion, and 3, the material is a bit easier to understand because it's non-academic. Alright, that's it for question 2 on TOEFL speaking. Remember to come back next week for question 3. And remember to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on any useful TOEFL tips. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye!